Hello, it's Lisa again, here to finish a discussion about fractions. Today we're going to talk about adding and subtracting fractions. First, we'll talk about adding and subtracting fractions with a common denominator. You want to first add or subtract the numerators, keep the common denominator, and as always with fractions, write your fractions in lowest terms. Let's go through these three steps with an example. 5/8 plus 1/8. Notice we do have the same denominator. So in our directions, we're going to add or subtract the numerator. In this case, we're adding. We have a plus sign in the middle. 5 plus 1 is 6, and we're going to put that over our common denominator, which was 8. 6 over 8, 6 is 3 times 2, 8 is 4 times 2. We have a common factor of 2. So in reduced form, our answer is 3/4. Now we're going to go to the next page and do some examples without a common denominator. So how do you find a common denominator? First, write both denominators in prime factored form. The least common denominator is the product of all the different prime factors, using each factor the most number of times it is used in either denominator. Write each fraction with the lowest common denominator using the property of 1. Multiply the numerator and denominator by the same amount to get the lowest common denominator. What you multiply by are the missing factors in the numerator. So let's look at some examples. Add the following fractions. If we look, we have 7/9 plus 8 over 21. The fractions are not the same. So if we look at our steps here, the first thing it says is to write both denominators in prime factored form. So 9 is 3 times 3. 21 is 3 times 7. The least common factor is the product of all the different factors, using each factor the most times it is used in either denominator. 3 is used twice here and once here. So our lowest common denominator is going to use 2 factors of 3. And then the other factor that we have is 7. We have just one factor of 7, so we're going to use it once. Our lowest common denominator, 3 times 3 is 9, times 7 is 63. Now, when I think about what I have to multiply by using the property of 1, I look at my factors. My denominator should have 3 times 3 times 7. So what is this one missing? It has the 3 and the 3. It's missing the 7. So I'm going to multiply my first fraction by 7 over 7. Multiplying by 7 over 7 gives me 49. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 9 is 63. And yes, we said our lowest common denominator should be 63. Plus, now I'm going to look at that second fraction. What is it missing? It has 1 3 and 1 7. It's missing that second factor of 3. So I need to multiply the fraction by 3 over 3. 8 times 3 is 24. 21 times 3 is 63. And now when I look, I do have common denominators of 63. So I can proceed to adding my fractions. Add the numerators. 49 plus 24 is 73, and put it over my common denominator, 63. 73 over 63 is in lowest terms. I don't have to do anything else here. And I'm not worried about writing these fractions in as mixed numbers. I can keep them in fraction form. Example 2. We have 30 as one denominator, 50 as the other. 30 is 6 times 5, or 3 times 2 times 5. 50 is 5 times 10, or 5 times 5 times 2. So again, to find my lowest common denominator, I'm going to look at what factors I have. I have one factor of 3, so I need a factor of 3. I have one factor of 2 here. I have one factor of 2 here. I need one factor of 2. Here I have one factor of 5. Here I have 2. I want to keep the most, so I want to keep 2 5s. So my lowest common denominator is going to be 3 times 2 is 6 times 5 is 30 times 5 is 150. Now when I look at my denominators, 30 has a 3, a 2, and a 5. What are we missing? We're missing the second 5. I need 5 over 5, right? There's 3, 2, 5. That's the one I'm missing. It should have exactly the same list of factors as my lowest common denominator. And if we multiply straight across, 5 times 11 is 55. 5 times 30 is 130. Plus, in my second fraction, 50, we said 50. Let me erase my numbers over here. We said 50 is 5 times 5 times 2. It's missing the factor of 3. So I need to multiply 3 over 50 by 3 over 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 50 times 3 is 150. And I just noticed I had a mistake here. Should this one be 130? No. This one should be 5 times 30 is 150. I just wrote it down wrong. Now my fractions have the same denominator. I can add them. 55 plus 9 is 64 over 150. And the last thing I always have to think about is lowest terms. 64 over 150. I know they're both even, so I can take out a factor of 2. 64 is 2 times 32, and 150 is 2 times 75. My 2's cancel. I get 32 over 75. And we have to think about, can we reduce that any more? 75 is like having 3 quarters. So we have 3 times 5 times 5. None of those are factors of 32. I know I'm done. Now we've seen examples with adding. We're going to do some subtraction problems next. If we look at example 1, do we have a common denominator? The answer here is yes. So when we want to subtract two fractions with a common denominator, we subtract the numerators. 9 minus 3 is 6, and keep the common denominator. This I can reduce. 6 is 3 times 2. 10 is 2 times 5. I can cancel out my common factor of 2, and my answer in lowest terms is 3/5. Let's look at example number 2. Do our fractions have the same denominator? No. If I write them in prime factored form, 9 is 3 times 3, 15 is 3 times 5. Again, lowest common denominator. We have 2 3's. We need 2 factors of 3 in our denominator. We've already taken care of 3's. Now we need a 5. So our lowest common denominator, 3 times 3 is 9, times 5 is 45. So now I need to look at 9. I've got 3 and 3. I'm missing the 5. So I need to multiply my first fraction by 5 over 5. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 9 is 45. And then we're going to subtract the second fraction. Now the second fraction has 15. 15 we said was 3 times 5. It's missing that second factor of 3. We need to multiply 14/15 by 3 over 3. 14 times 3 is 42. 15 times 3 is 45. Now, if you have a hard time with doing the arithmetic, make sure you're doing that 14 times 3 on your calculator. 5 minus 42. Again, if that's difficult for you, do that on the calculator. 5 minus 42 is negative 37. Keep the common denominator 45. And this fraction happens to be in lowest terms. Now, if you're not sure if a fraction is in lowest terms, we can check it on our calculator. So for this last example, we had 5 minus 42. Whoops, it helps if it types right. 5 minus 42 gives us negative 37. So we said our fraction was negative 37 divided by 45. When you do that on the calculator, it gives you a decimal answer. If you want to know if your fraction is in lowest terms, hit the math key. Option 1 says fraction. So let me do this down here. And we want option 1 for fraction. And then hit enter, enter. And it tells us what that fraction is in lowest terms. Okay, so again, this was hit the math key, hit the number 1, and then hit enter again. And it tells you this is the fraction. It will always give you the fraction in lowest terms if you do it that way on the calculator. Okay, as an example, let's look at the previous one. We had 6 divided by 10. If I hit enter, it gives me 0.6, but if I go math, fraction is 1, enter, it tells me 3/5. There's my fraction in lowest terms. Does it match what we got? Yes, it does. So that's one way to double check on your calculator that your fractions are in lowest terms. We have one more example here. Example number 3. Let me move this down a little bit so it's not quite so crowded. Example number 3. 5 over 14 minus 1 over 21. Again, we need the common denominator. 14 is 2 times 7. 21 is 3 times 7. Lowest common denominator. We need a factor of 2. We need a factor of 7. We need a factor of 3. We already have one factor of 7, so we don't need another one. Our lowest common denominator, 2 times 7 times 3, is 42. 5 over 14. 14 we said was 2 times 7, means we need a 3. So we're going to multiply this fraction by 3 over 3. 3 times 5 is 15, over 3 times 14 is 42, minus. Now we turn our attention to our second fraction. And we said 21 is 3 times 7, means we're missing a factor of 2. I have to multiply by 2 over 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 21 times 2 is 42. When I subtract, 15 minus 2 is 13. Keep the common denominator 42. And I know those two can't be reduced, so I'm done at this point. That's the end of this video. Please go to the homework for section 2.5 and on to the quiz. There's one more section in this module.